The myth of overnight success. We love the image of the prodigy. The stage lights blinding, the crowd erupting, the effortless display of genius that seems almost supernatural. A young musician's fingers dancing across the piano keys. A painter unveiling a masterpiece that defies belief. A startup founder selling their company for millions before their 30th birthday. We watch in awe and assume it must have happened suddenly, as if these people woke up one day and discovered an extraordinary gift hidden inside them. We call them naturals, born to do this, geniuses. But the truth is far less romantic and far more demanding. Because behind every dazzling moment of mastery lies a graveyard of invisible years. Mozart, often paraded as the symbol of effortless genius, wasn't composing symphonies in his sleep. By the time he wrote his first widely celebrated works, he had already spent over a decade in relentless training under his father's unforgiving guidance. 10 years before the world even noticed him. Pablo Picasso is remembered for his revolutionary style and boundless creativity. But few realize that before he shattered the rules of art, he had already produced over 20,000 works, most of them unseen, forgotten, or dismissed. Thousands of hours in cramped rooms, brush in hand, wrestling with canvas after canvas, chasing something no one else could see. Kobe Bryant, revered as one of basketball's greatest, didn't just have it. He manufactured it. In his teenage years, while others slept, he was on the court at 4 a.m., repeating the same shots hundreds of times, refining the smallest details. The public saw the championships, the highlight reels, the impossible game winners. What they didn't see were the mornings he played alone in an empty gym, long before the cameras arrived. But we don't like that part of the story. The long, messy middle. We live in a culture obsessed with shortcuts, where the most seductive myth is that of the overnight success. It's comforting to believe mastery is a lightning strike, rare, random, beyond our control. Because if it's a lightning strike, we can forgive ourselves for never chasing it. Media makes it worse. Headlines celebrate the moment of arrival, not the years of anonymity. Social media condenses a decade of effort into a 60-second montage. The struggle is edited out, replaced with a highlight reel that tricks the mind into believing greatness is quick, easy, and available to anyone with a little luck. Psychologists call this the illusion of sudden genius. Our brains are naturally drawn to the visible outcome, not the hidden process. It's a cognitive shortcut. We see the success, we assume it must have appeared fully formed. This illusion makes mastery look like a gift bestowed, not a craft built. And that illusion is dangerous. Because when you believe success should be fast, every obstacle feels like a sign you're not cut out for it. The first time progress slows, you quit. The first time you fail, you assume you've reached the limit of your talent. Worse, you may never start at all, because the gap between where you are and where you think a natural should be feels too humiliating to bridge. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Mastery is never an event. It is always a process. A slow, repetitive, sometimes tedious process that demands a commitment most people aren't willing to make. It doesn't happen in leaps, but in inches. In hours no one will ever count. In sacrifices no one will ever thank you for. The most dangerous thing about the myth of overnight success is that it convinces people that the early struggle is proof they're not destined for greatness, when in reality, that struggle is the very path to it. The years before anyone notices you aren't wasted time, they are the foundation. They are where the craft takes root, where the real transformation happens. Ask yourself, if the world never saw the result, would you still be willing to do the work? Would you still show up in the dark, day after day, with no applause, no validation, just the quiet faith that this is shaping you into something greater? That is the test. And if you can answer yes, not just once but over and over across years, then you've already taken the first step toward mastery. You've rejected the seductive lie of the shortcut, and chosen the long road. The road where nothing happens overnight, but everything changes over time. The spotlight moment, the public recognition, the applause, they are not the reward. They are the echo. The real reward is becoming someone who can stand in that moment without being destroyed by it. Someone forged in the invisible years. The prodigy on stage is not a miracle. They are proof of what is possible when you are willing to disappear into the work. And in that disappearance you find the truth. Greatness doesn't strike like lightning. It grows like a tree. Slow, silent, invisible at first, until one day it stands where nothing stood before. Mastery is not built in the spotlight. It is built in the quiet hours no one talks about. While the world celebrates the results, the record-breaking performance, the flawless artwork, the breakthrough idea, the real work is happening far away from applause, in the silent architecture of repetition, discipline, and design. Every master you admire has a blueprint. Not a mystical one, Not a secret passed down in shadows, but a structure, a framework of habits, rituals, and mental conditioning that allow them to return to their craft again and again, regardless of mood, distraction, or failure. This structure is what neuroscientists call deliberate practice. Unlike mindless repetition, deliberate practice is targeted, intentional, and painfully uncomfortable. It's breaking down a skill into its smallest moving parts and hammering at the weakest links. It's the violinist playing the same 4 bars for 3 hours until the hands ache. It's the writer deleting and rewriting the same paragraph until the rhythm feels right. It's the athlete rehearsing a single movement until muscle memory engraves it into their nervous system. Biologically, mastery is a story of wiring. Every time you practice with focus, you're wrapping myelin, a fatty insulation, around the neural pathways involved in that skill. The thicker the myelin, the faster and more precise your movements or thoughts become. This is why repetition is not boring, it's transformative. Every precise repetition strengthens the signal, until the skill becomes second nature. Leonardo da Vinci didn't just sit in a burst of inspiration and paint the Last Supper. He spent years dissecting human bodies to understand anatomy, sketching hundreds of faces, experimenting with perspective and light. He was building the architecture before he laid the final brick. Serena Williams didn't become a legend because she simply loved tennis. She constructed her mastery on top of countless drills, footwork exercises, and endless mental conditioning sessions. Love for the game was the spark, but the structure, the architecture, was what kept her at the top when the spark faded. Bruce Lee famously said, "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times." That statement isn't about fear. It's about respect for the structure. One kick, repeated with intention, transforms not just the body but the mind. And here is where most people fail. They confuse excitement with commitment. They chase novelty instead of structure. They try a skill for a few weeks, hit a plateau, and move on to the next shiny thing. They never stay long enough in one place to build the architecture. Because architecture is slow. It is tedious. It is invisible in the beginning. You can spend months, even years, building it and have nothing to show the outside world. And in an age addicted to immediate results, that kind of patience feels almost impossible. But here's the paradox. The architecture is the shortcut. It is the only shortcut. If you skip it, you start over every time. If you master it, you can apply it to anything: music, business, sport, writing, negotiation, leadership. Skills change. The architecture doesn't. Think of it like constructing a fortress. The walls are your habits. The gates are your boundaries. The watchtowers are your awareness of weaknesses. Every brick is a choice, to show up, to focus, to push one step further. And when the storms come, distractions, failures, criticism, it's that fortress that keeps your pursuit alive. The world will tempt you to build without a blueprint, to stack bricks at random and hope something beautiful emerges. But without structure, everything collapses under pressure. This is why deliberate practice demands humility. It forces you to confront your flaws every single day. It strips away the ego and replaces it with discipline. And over time, something strange happens. You begin to crave the grind. You start to find beauty in the smallest improvements. A cleaner note. A sharper movement. A more precise line. Masters are not just people who have reached the top of their field. They are people who have fallen in love with the architecture itself. They build even when no one is watching. They return to the basics long after others have abandoned them. And the architecture doesn't only shape the skill, it shapes the person. You become more patient, more focused, more resilient. You learn how to endure boredom without losing momentum. You learn how to face failure without letting it define you. You learn to trust the process even when the results are months or years away. In the silence of deliberate practice, there are no guarantees. You may not know when, or if, the world will ever recognize your work. But the irony is that the moment you stop needing recognition, you start creating your best work. The architecture frees you from chasing applause. It gives you something better: control over your craft. Every skill has its own techniques, but the architecture is universal. And once you've built it once, you can rebuild it anywhere. You can dismantle it and reassemble it in a new field. You can walk into the unknown and know that, given enough time, you will master it, not because of talent but because you understand how mastery is built. It's easy to envy the master on the stage. Harder to envy the architect who spent years building in silence. But it's the architect who controls the outcome. And that's the choice you face. Do you want the moment of glory, or do you want the ability to create it again and again in any field for the rest of your life? The silent architecture is waiting. But no one can build it for you. Most people don't quit because they lack talent. They quit because they run out of time, energy, or belief before the results arrive. The journey to mastery is not a straight road. It is an unending stretch of invisible miles. And somewhere along that road, almost everyone meets the same shadow, the voice that says, "This isn't worth it." Endurance is not just about stamina. It is about staying alive inside your own pursuit when the world gives you every reason to stop. It's not the sprint at the beginning, it's the quiet walk in the dark after the cheering has faded. Psychologists call this the delayed gratification gap, the chasm between effort and visible reward. Crossing it requires more than willpower, it requires meaning. Viktor Frankl, a man who survived Nazi concentration camps, wrote that those who could find meaning, even in suffering, could endure conditions that crushed others. Endurance is never powered by comfort. It is powered by purpose. Nietzsche put it more simply, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. The same is true for mastery. Without a reason deeper than applause or profit, you will not last. Because when applause fades and profit disappears, the why is the only thing left to hold on to. Look at the great marathon runners. By mile 2 they are warmed up. By mile 10 their bodies ache. By mile 20, they enter what's called the wall, the point where the body screams for them to stop. Those who quit do so here. Those who continue do not rely on motivation, they run on something primal, a commitment that was made long before the pain arrived. The same wall exists in every field. The entrepreneur who sees their first 3 ventures fail. The musician who spends years performing in empty bars. The author who collects hundreds of rejections. The scientist whose experiments fail again and again. Each one meets the wall. Each one must decide whether the wall is the end, or the beginning of a new phase. Grit, as Angela Duckworth describes it, is the combination of passion and perseverance over long periods. Passion alone is not enough, it burns bright and dies fast. Perseverance alone is mechanical, it keeps you moving but without direction. Together they create endurance, the ability to move forward with both fire and discipline. Endurance is also about emotional regulation. There will be days you wake up and feel nothing. No drive, no spark, no creative rush. Masters don't wait for the spark. They work in its absence. They understand that feelings are unreliable navigators. Action is the only true compass. Failure plays a central role here. In the early stages, failure feels like a verdict. Later, it becomes a signal. It points to what needs to be adjusted, refined, learned. People who endure see failure as part of the architecture, as much a building block as success. Consider Thomas Edison, who famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." This wasn't arrogance. It was survival. To keep going after thousands of failed attempts requires a redefinition of failure itself. Endurance also requires pacing. Many burn out not because they work too little but because they work too hard, too fast, without rest. The mind and body are not machines, they are ecosystems. Push them past the breaking point and they will shut you down. Masters know when to sprint and when to recover. They see rest not as weakness but as a strategic choice. Perhaps the most difficult part of endurance is that it feels endless. There is no clear sign telling you you're almost there. You can work for years without knowing how close you are to the breakthrough. This uncertainty destroys more dreams than outright failure ever could. The secret is to stop measuring distance and start measuring direction. If you are moving forward, even by a fraction, you are already succeeding. You don't need to know how long it will take. You only need to know that you will not stop. There's an image I return to often, a miner digging for diamonds. Most quit inches away from the vein, never realizing how close they were. Endurance is the decision to take one more swing, even when the tunnel feels endless. The mind will tell you, it's too far. The world will say, it's not worth it. And endurance answers, we'll see. Because those who master anything are not the ones who started fastest. They are the ones who kept going when the road disappeared, when the sky went dark, and when the only sound was their own footsteps echoing forward. Endurance is not glamorous. It is not loud. It is not celebrated in the moment. But it is the reason some reach the summit while others stop halfway up the mountain. And here's the truth, the mountain doesn't care how tired you are. It only rewards those who keep climbing. Every master has a shadow, and that shadow is obsession. It is the thing that drives them deeper when everyone else has gone home. The thing that keeps them awake at night, replaying the same sequence in their head, unable to let it go. Obsession is the fuel that burns hotter than motivation, hotter than discipline. It is the relentless itch that will not stop until the work is done, and even then it asks for more. To outsiders, obsession looks dangerous. And sometimes, it is. It consumes time, relationships, comfort, and balance. But for those chasing mastery, it can be the very force that pulls them past the limits of ordinary effort. Elon Musk once said he worked 100 hours a week for years. Not because he had to, because he couldn't not work. His companies, his ideas, his goals, they lived in his head like a second heartbeat. Marie Curie spent so many nights in her laboratory that she carried radioactive material in her pockets, unaware of the danger, obsessed with unlocking the secrets of the elements. Michael Phelps swam so many hours that the smell of chlorine seeped into his skin. These stories sound extreme, and they are. But they reveal a truth most won't admit. To reach the highest level of anything, there must be a period where balance is sacrificed. Not forever, but long enough for the craft to take root so deeply that it becomes inseparable from your identity. Obsession is different from passion. Passion is the fire you feel when you love something. Obsession is what happens when that fire spreads into every corner of your mind. It turns the craft into a lens through which you see the world. The chess master walks through a park and notices patterns of movement like pieces on a board. The filmmaker watches sunlight hit a building and imagines how it would look in a scene. The coder sees a problem in daily life and mentally writes the algorithm to solve it. But obsession is a blade with two edges. On one side, it cuts through the noise, focuses you like nothing else, and drives you to depths others will never reach. On the other, it can slice into your health, your relationships, and your sanity if left unchecked. History is filled with stories of masters whose obsession devoured them from within. Van Gogh painted with a fever that consumed his mind. Howard Hughes designed airplanes and films while his compulsions grew into a prison. Bobby Fischer became the greatest chess player alive, but his obsession eventually turned to paranoia. The same force that built their greatness also contributed to their downfall. So, the question becomes, how do you use obsession without letting it use you? The answer is in control. Controlled obsession is when you allow the craft to dominate your focus in structured bursts. Periods where you willingly push beyond comfort, knowing that rest and recovery will follow. Uncontrolled obsession is when the craft consumes everything, leaving no space for perspective or renewal. Masters learn to cycle between these states. They enter the tunnel fully, days, weeks, sometimes months of intense, almost monastic focus, and then they step back, allowing life to breathe into their work. Without this rhythm, obsession burns out the mind like a candle left too long in the flame. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people never even reach the point where obsession becomes a risk. They dabble. They try. They touch the edge of effort and then retreat. They fear the cost before they've even begun to pay it. And in doing so, they never discover the depth of what they could have been capable of. The masters you admire have all had a period of unhealthy imbalance. Times when they gave more to their craft than anyone thought reasonable. It's not sustainable forever, but it's often necessary to break through the gravity of mediocrity. You can't casually walk into mastery. You have to be pulled, or pushed, by something stronger than comfort. Something that makes you willing to sit in the chair for 12 hours, willing to miss the party, willing to feel like the world is moving on without you while you perfect a single detail. For some, this obsession begins as necessity, a desperate need to escape poverty, to prove someone wrong, to rebuild after failure. For others, it comes from love, the pure, irrational joy of the craft itself. Either way, it eventually becomes the same thing. An unshakable need to keep going. Controlled obsession is the force that will let you compress decades of progress into years. It will make you see opportunities others miss, solve problems they can't, and push through resistance they won't. It is dangerous, yes, but so is mediocrity. In the end, mastery will ask you for everything. And for a time you may have to give it. Not forever, not to the point of destruction, but long enough to cross the invisible threshold where your craft becomes not something you do, but something you are. And once you cross that threshold, you will never truly leave it. Even if you step away for a time, even if you rest, even if life pulls you in other directions, the craft will live inside you. You will see the world through its eyes. You will carry it like a secret flame, waiting for the moment you return to feed it again. That is the role of obsession. It is the dangerous, beautiful, necessary shadow of mastery. Handle it with care, but don't be afraid to let it in. Every plan looks perfect until it collides with reality. In your mind, the path to mastery is clean. You put in the work, you climb the ladder, and eventually you arrive. But reality is not a straight line. It's a battlefield of interruptions, failures, and forces you never saw coming. Stephen Pressfield called it the resistance, an invisible force that appears the moment you decide to do something meaningful. It's not just procrastination or self-doubt. It's life itself throwing chaos at your plans. History is full of masters who built their craft under perfect conditions, and then had it ripped away. Wars have interrupted scientific breakthroughs. Injuries have ended athletic careers. Censorship has silenced writers and artists. Entire lives' work has been lost to fire, theft, politics, or the randomness of disaster. Beethoven composed some of his greatest works while going deaf. His very tool, his hearing, was stripped away, yet he found a way to keep creating. Stephen Hawking was told he had 2 years to live after being diagnosed with ALS. His body failed him, but his mind refused to surrender. He went on to redefine our understanding of black holes and the universe. These people didn't reach mastery because life was easy. They reached it because they adapted when it became hard. They understood the most important truth about the friction of reality: the world owes you nothing and it will not pause to let you succeed. This is the part most people never prepare for. They imagine the grind, the discipline, the obsession, but not the storm. And when the storm comes, they think it's a sign to turn back. In truth, it's a sign you're closer than you think. The resistance intensifies right before the breakthrough. The friction of reality forces you to make a choice: fight for the craft, or let it go. And here's the uncomfortable part: sometimes letting go is the right choice. Sometimes the storm is too strong, the timing too wrong, the resources too few. But more often than not, it's not the storm that defeats you. It's your reaction to it. The masters who survive are the ones who bend without breaking. They pivot. They reimagine. They rebuild. They are willing to reinvent themselves while holding on to the core of their craft. A boxer breaks his hand and becomes a trainer. A dancer suffers a career-ending injury and transitions into choreography. A journalist is silenced and turns to fiction. The craft evolves, but the pursuit continues. That's what most people misunderstand. Mastery is not tied to one form. It's tied to the mindset that you will keep building even if the shape changes. The form is temporary. The drive is permanent. When you accept this, you stop expecting life to give you a clear runway. You expect turbulence. You plan for it. You build your habits and your systems so that when the storm hits, you keep moving, even if it's slower, even if it's harder, even if it's in a different direction than you planned. There's a quiet confidence that comes with this mindset. You stop panicking when things go wrong because you understand that mastery was never about perfect conditions. It's about finding a way forward when nothing is ideal. Life will take things from you: time, resources, people you thought you couldn't live without. But it cannot take your ability to adapt, unless you give it away. The friction of reality isn't the enemy. It's the forge. It burns away illusions, distractions, and half-hearted attempts, leaving only what's strong enough to last. If you can keep going through that, you don't just become skilled, you become unshakable. And when you reach that point, something changes. You stop seeing the storms as threats and start seeing them as the final test. Not to prove yourself to the world, but to prove yourself to yourself. Every plan looks perfect until it collides with reality. In your mind, the path to mastery is clean. You put in the work, you climb the ladder, and eventually you arrive. But reality is not a straight line. It's a battlefield of interruptions, failures, and forces you never saw coming. Stephen Pressfield called it the resistance, an invisible force that appears the moment you decide to do something meaningful. It's not just procrastination or self-doubt. It's life itself throwing chaos at your plans. History is full of masters who built their craft under perfect conditions, and then had it ripped away. Wars have interrupted scientific breakthroughs. Injuries have ended athletic careers. Censorship has silenced writers and artists. Entire lives' work has been lost to fire, theft, politics, or the randomness of disaster. Beethoven composed some of his greatest works while going deaf. His very tool, his hearing, was stripped away, yet he found a way to keep creating. Stephen Hawking was told he had 2 years to live after being diagnosed with ALS. His body failed him, but his mind refused to surrender. He went on to redefine our understanding of black holes and the universe. These people didn't reach mastery because life was easy. They reached it because they adapted when it became hard. They understood the most important truth about the friction of reality: the world owes you nothing and it will not pause to let you succeed. This is the part most people never prepare for. They imagine the grind, the discipline, the obsession, but not the storm. And when the storm comes, they think it's a sign to turn back. In truth, it's a sign you're closer than you think. The resistance intensifies right before the breakthrough. The friction of reality forces you to make a choice: fight for the craft, or let it go. And here's the uncomfortable part: sometimes letting go is the right choice. Sometimes the storm is too strong, the timing too wrong, the resources too few. But more often than not, it's not the storm that defeats you. It's your reaction to it. The masters who survive are the ones who bend without breaking. They pivot. They reimagine. They rebuild. They are willing to reinvent themselves while holding on to the core of their craft. A boxer breaks his hand and becomes a trainer. A dancer suffers a career-ending injury and transitions into choreography. A journalist is silenced and turns to fiction. The craft evolves, but the pursuit continues. That's what most people misunderstand. Mastery is not tied to one form. It's tied to the mindset that you will keep building even if the shape changes. The form is temporary. The drive is permanent. When you accept this, you stop expecting life to give you a clear runway. You expect turbulence. You plan for it. You build your habits and your systems so that when the storm hits, you keep moving, even if it's slower, even if it's harder, even if it's in a different direction than you planned. There's a quiet confidence that comes with this mindset. You stop panicking when things go wrong because you understand that mastery was never about perfect conditions. It's about finding a way forward when nothing is ideal. Life will take things from you. Time, resources, people you thought you couldn't live without. But it cannot take your ability to adapt, unless you give it away. The friction of reality isn't the enemy. It's the forge. It burns away illusions, distractions, and half-hearted attempts, leaving only what's strong enough to last. If you can keep going through that, you don't just become skilled, you become unshakable. And when you reach that point, something changes. You stop seeing the storms as threats and start seeing them as the final test. Not to prove yourself to the world, but to prove yourself to yourself. There comes a point in the journey where mastery stops being about skill and starts being about identity. At first, you practice because you want to improve. You push through repetitions, endure failures, and chase the milestones that prove you're getting better. But somewhere along the way, something shifts. The practice is no longer just something you do. It becomes something you are. This is the hidden transformation that separates the great from the ordinary. The moment the line between self and craft begins to dissolve. Eastern philosophy has long hinted at this. The Zen archer who releases the bowstring not to hit the target, but to express the unity between body, breath, and motion. The Taoist teaching that true mastery comes when action flows without conscious effort. When the dancer becomes the dance, the writer becomes the athlete becomes the movement. Modern psychology calls this flow state, the moment when time disappears, distractions fade, and the work feels less like work and more like inevitability. But flow is not magic. It is not random. It is the reward for years of training the mind to enter that space on command. In this state, the ego fades. You stop asking, "Am I good enough?" You stop wondering, "What will people think?" The work consumes you, and in that consumption you find freedom. This is why mastery is not just about external achievement. Trophies, titles, and recognition are fleeting. The true prize is internal, the transformation of a person into someone inseparable from their craft. A master does not play the piano. A master is the piano. A master does not paint a picture. A master is the picture. And yet, this transformation is subtle. It does not happen in a single moment of enlightenment. It happens quietly, through repetition, through failure, through long nights when no one is watching. You wake up one day and realize, this is no longer just practice. This is me. The danger, of course, is mistaking mastery for completion. As if one day you arrive at the summit and can finally declare, "I have mastered it." But mastery is not a trophy. It is not a finish line. It is a way of moving through the world. The moment you believe you've arrived, you've already begun to decay. The great masters never stop learning. They remain students until the end, not because they aren't skilled enough, but because they understand the craft has no end. The ocean is infinite. The deeper you dive, the more vast it becomes. And so, the real question is not, will you master something? The real question is, what will you allow to master you? Because mastery always requires surrender. You cannot hold yourself apart from the craft and expect to reach its highest levels. You must give something up. Time, comfort, ego, the illusion of balance. But in that surrender, you are given something back. A clarity that others will never know. A depth of experience that cannot be faked. A way of seeing the world that is sharper, richer, and infinitely more alive. Becoming a master is not about becoming more than others. It is about becoming more than you were yesterday. It is about stepping into the river of discipline and letting it carve you into someone new. And when the world finally notices, when the stage lights shine, when the applause erupts, when people call you a genius or a prodigy, you will know the truth. That mastery was never in the spotlight. It was in the shadows, in the quiet, in the invisible years where no one believed in you but yourself. The journey ends where it began, not in triumph but in the work itself. And so the question lingers long after the echoes fade, not can you master something? But are you willing to let something master you?